What of it? If I die, I die. It will be no great loss to the world, and I am thoroughly bored with life. Isn't this how many of us feel, especially the younger generation? We're confused, bored, tired, emotionally numb, and struggling with the meaninglessness of it all. We want freedom from everything, no attachments, no constraints. Yet, deep down, we also crave happiness. We want a life like Pechorin's, someone who lives without following society's rules. Lermontov brings this idea to life in his novel, A Hero of Our Time at age 25, where Pechorin, the protagonist, seems to embody the powerful, carefree existence of Nietzsche's lion stage of the Übermensch. But Lermontov shows us the darker side of this. Pechorin, perhaps a sociopath, living a life that, while outwardly captivating, reveals a deeper emptiness, a fable without a moral. In 19th century Russia, there was a group of young, ambitious men known as the Superfluous men. They were talented but aimless, much like Pechorin, and they became the focus of Lermontov's novel. Their struggle, though rooted in a different time, speaks to us today. It's a lesson for young men, people like you and me, who find ourselves caught in the same disillusionment. Pechorin's life, though initially appealing, isn't the answer to life's questions. In fact, it can lead to narcissism, instability, and a life of inner turmoil. His story shows us that living without meaning or connection may give us temporary freedom, but ultimately leaves us hollow and lost. So let's discuss it. The danger of moral indifference. Out of life's storm, I carried only a few ideas and not one feeling. There's a strange beauty and a twisted sense of satisfaction in not caring about anything. It's the essence of Camus' Absurdism, which he explores in The Stranger. The protagonist, Meursault, is utterly indifferent to the world around him. His mother dies, he gets thrown in jail, and at one point, he kills a man. Yet none of it affects him. He's emotionally detached from everything. This is absurdism, and oddly enough, it can lead to a sense of happiness, perhaps more than most people experience, as it frees you from the burden of caring. Pechorin, the protagonist of A Hero of Our Time, reflects a similar mindset. He's talented, attractive, and charismatic, able to get whatever he wants. He lives with a complete disregard for morality. He has affairs with women, and when he grows bored, he breaks their hearts without hesitation or guilt. His only true pleasures lie in power and sleeping with multiple women. He kills men without remorse, as though it's simply a part of life. It's as if his conscience is dead. Those around him don't quite understand him, but they're captivated by him. Even the staff captain is in awe, marveling at how Pechorin can attract more women than he can. When Pechorin is following his girlfriend Vera, his horse collapses, and he just stops, considering that there's no point in continuing to pursue her if he's only going to tire of her eventually. When Pechorin dismisses Bella's love, he says, "The love of a wild girl is no better than that of a noble woman." The simplicity and ignorance of a wild girl are just as tiresome as the coquettishness of a noble woman. Bella is killed by Kazbich. Does this bother Pechorin? Of course not. Pechorin's relationships with his friends reflect this emotional detachment as well. When Maxim waits for him for a long time, Pechorin's greeting is nothing more than a cold handshake. There's another friend, Werner, a doctor, who's the only person to truly understand Pechorin's nature. Werner assists Pechorin during a duel with Grushnitsky, another friend who was betrayed by Pechorin when he manipulated and slept with his girlfriend. The duel ends with Pechorin killing Grushnitsky, and Werner, appalled by Pechorin's sociopathic behavior, leaves. But Pechorin doesn't care. He remains indifferent to Werner's departure. This is the result of a man who has abandoned moral codes and crafted his own meaning of life. Pechorin might seem happy, carefree, and even free from the constraints of society, but his detachment is dangerous. It's an approach to life that resembles Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch. Pechorin, though apparently happy, is destructive, both to himself and to those around him. This theme is also explored in Dostoevsky's work. In Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov believes he's above conventional morality, just like Pechorin. He thinks he's an extraordinary man, someone who has the right to break society's laws for a higher purpose. He divides humanity into two categories: ordinary individuals who follow moral norms and extraordinary men, like Napoleon, who have the right to break those norms in the pursuit of something greater. Raskolnikov justifies the murder of the pawnbroker Alyona Ivanovna by seeing her as a useless person, one whose wealth could be redistributed for the greater good. This act is his attempt to assert control over his fate, to prove his superiority, and to validate his own moral code. But in doing so, he destroys everything in his path, both morally and psychologically. I'm not saying that Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch is totally wrong, but Pechorin doesn't seem to follow it very well. I'll discuss this in the later part of the video as well. Anyways, there are striking parallels between Pechorin, Raskolnikov, us young minds, and the figures in Machiavelli's The Prince, which I'll discuss now. The end justifies the means. This infamous line, indirectly coined by Machiavelli in The Prince, led to the banning of the work in several places. The way Machiavelli exposed the ruthless strategies of power politics was deemed immoral, yet the truth of his insights about politics, states remained undeniable. Pechorin embodies this philosophy in his own life. When it comes to women, he manipulates. When it comes to power over men, he uses any means necessary to achieve his goal. Power is his only true source of happiness, as he himself admits. If I considered myself to be better, more powerful than everyone in the world, I would be happy. This is his sole pursuit, to win over others, to dominate them. And in doing so, he turns the lives of those around him into a battlefield, destroying their hopes and dreams to fuel his own. Take his pursuit of Bela, for example. Bela is a Muslim woman, and in his obsession with her, Pechorin goes so far as to study the Muslim religion, learning its practices and customs, all to conquer her. His interest in her is not out of love, but as another conquest to claim for his own. He's like an actor on a stage, alternating between affection and indifference in order to keep her hooked. His actions are a calculated performance, designed purely to win her affections and ultimately control her emotions. But it's not just women Pechorin manipulates. He also plays on Grushnitsky's insecurities, undermining his confidence and pushing him toward desperate actions. Pechorin knows exactly how to push his buttons, and he orchestrates their duel with the knowledge that Grushnitsky's pride will prevent him from backing down. He treats others as mere pawns in his own game, always striving for greater power and control. But one thing is clear: there's a reason for his inability to form lasting attachments with anyone, a point I'll explore in detail now. Pechorin was undoubtedly a hedonistic and egoistic character, but there's a deeper explanation for his inability to make true connections and remain emotionally invested in anyone. At the heart of this lies his vulnerability and the intoxicating temptation of freedom. True commitment in a relationship requires vulnerability, a willingness to open yourself up to someone else's love, fears, and expectations. But vulnerability is a daunting thing. It's a fear of missing out, a fear of what others will think, and most importantly, a fear of whether or not someone will love you back. This fear echoed in Pechorin's mind throughout his interactions. It's why he couldn't maintain any genuine connection. The moment things became serious, he distanced himself. The real reason wasn't just that he got bored, it was because he couldn't handle the vulnerability. As long as he remained detached, there was no way someone could hurt him emotionally. No matter how much he manipulated or used others, he stayed in control of his own feelings. Pechorin himself once said, "I never loved for anyone. I love for myself, my personal pleasure." For him, love was nothing more than a tool for self-gratification, a means of feeding his ego. He would manipulate others, creating an illusion of intimacy, but never allowing anyone to truly get close. His relationships were nothing but calculated performances, and once they served their purpose, he would discard them without a second thought. This detachment made Pechorin irresistibly attractive in the moment. He wasn't like the nice guys who sought emotional intimacy or commitment. He was unpredictable and mysterious, and that in itself made him more enticing. His ability to withdraw emotionally made him seem powerful and desirable. There was a rawness to his rejection of emotional attachment that both scared and fascinated those around him. This was a form of power, a toxic kind of masculinity that masked his deeper vulnerabilities. But hidden beneath this Machiavellian persona, driven by a relentless pursuit of power and dominance, was another figure, the weak, insecure man. Pechorin's outward arrogance and cynicism served as armor, but beneath it, he was searching for something greater, something that could fill the emptiness inside him. His pursuit of power and control over others wasn't just a desire for dominance. It was a desperate attempt to find meaning in a world that had long since alienated him. As Dostoevsky put it in Notes from Underground, they were men who had everything but the one thing they truly wanted, the ability to live genuinely. In the end, even the most attractive and charismatic figures, when unable to truly connect with others, find themselves isolated in a world of their own making which depicts him as a weak man. Was he actually a weak person, though? Let's discuss. Afraid of decision, I buried my finer feelings in the depths of my heart, and they died there. This statement wasn't true at all. His finer feelings were in the depths of his heart, but they weren't dead at all. They were heating up inside him. Nietzsche called this weakness as well. Whenever someone tries to control others instead of themselves, they are revealing their greatest weakness. Pechorin, in fact, failed to follow the real definition of the Übermensch, creating his entire journey by placing himself above others in every possible way. The hero was essentially a cynic with narcissistic and sociopathic tendencies. While this approach worked for a time, making it seem like he was a content, happy man, deep inside, there was a constant knocking on the door of his heart, urging him to listen to himself. Though he gained power and the love of women, at one point, he fell into an existential crisis, much like Leo Tolstoy did in his own life. For Pechorin, there was nothing left to strive for. He yearned for a higher mission, something greater than himself that could provide meaning, something spiritual, you could say. It became another adventure, and the sole reason he kept living. At one point, he grappled with the concept of fate versus free will. After a debate with Lieutenant Vulich over whether individuals control their own destiny, Vulich fired a loaded pistol at his head in an act of defiance. Miraculously, the gun misfired, but later that night, Vulich was killed by a drunken Cossack soldier, fulfilling Pechorin's premonition of his death. This incident prompted Pechorin to test his own fate. When the murderer barricaded himself in a house, Pechorin devised a plan. While others feigned an attack from outside, he entered through a window and captured the murderer. Unlike Pechorin's earlier adventures, this one was marked by altruism and courage, as he prevented further harm instead of causing it. The fatalist signals a turning point in Pechorin's journey. Although he remains burdened by existential despair, his actions show a glimmer of hope and purpose. Anyways, this was one of the greatest novels by the young Lermontov, who died 1 year after writing it. How remarkable that, being so young, he wrote a masterpiece, showing the happy and most appealing side of his character, and then revealing the darker aspect of that appealing side many of us can relate to.